851, turn right heading 180. Order 14 Papa, turn right 245, report localizer established 27.
It's honestly been a quiet week within the aviation industry, so that's why you may have seen a lack of videos on the channel. However, from some further exploring and moving through various different newsrooms, I've managed to collect enough to hopefully provide you with a very intriguing recap of the latest aviation news across the past fortnight. So stay tuned and buckle up for another recap of the aviation industry. Beginning right off the bat with developments at British Airways. Towards the back end of the previous month, the airline continued to expand its global network as restrictions eased worldwide and travel, of course, becomes more accessible and more manageable. One route that has actually been absent for a considerable period and generally since the beginning of the pandemic has been their Australian service via Singapore Changi that does fly directly into Sydney. This is their only flight connecting the UK with Australia. BA15 touched down in the final days of March at 6:10 a.m. local time. The 23-hour-long journey is quite a lengthy one, as you would expect, and it includes a 90-minute stopover as mentioned in Changi, which does allow for new passengers to board the aircraft, existing ones to get off and go onwards to another destination, or simply stay in Singapore. And finally, of course, we have those passengers that are continuing on to Sydney. It gives them a little bit of time to stretch their legs if they want to. British Airways will be sending their 787 Dreamliner down to Sydney, and this service is going to be a daily one, making quite the landmark moment for both the UK-based airline alongside the Australian aviation industry, which took quite the hammering during the global pandemic, and any carrier returning through an existing route is more than I think welcomed, and also, of course, an increase on the options that are made available for people that, say, want to travel to the United Kingdom. The head of sales for the Asian Pacific region at British Airways said, British Airways has always had a solid link to Australia. London is the major gateway to Europe and one of the most popular destinations for our customers down under for both business and leisure travellers. Today, we are thrilled to fly to Australia once again and play our part in reuniting families and friends with their loved ones, including two of our cabin crew members, Ross and Mark, who are operating on this very special flight and reunited with their families in Sydney after 2 years apart. The 2 years apart, once again further indicating just how long it's been since British Airways connected the UK with Australia. Sticking with the Australian aviation sector, but moving towards the flag carrier Qantas, it's time to examine some recent developments involving their CEO and upper management, whom I must openly admit I'm not entirely fond of. These were comments that certainly made headlines, and really for all the wrong reasons. CEO Alan Joyce said that the passengers that were frustrated with queues and more at airports only have themselves to blame, as they are not, and I quote, match fit to fly after numerous lockdowns. And I wanted to further develop on what I said about airport queues by extending that to just general discussions with the airline itself. This comes as Qantas has been hot in the spotlight for, quite frankly, appalling customer service and generally a lack of staff at airports due to the significant offloading of employees during the pandemic. Upper management took it further by deflecting the blame essentially onto customers, later retracting the statement. Speaking to the Sydney Morning Herald, Alan Joyce said that when he flew recently, people forgot to take things out at security, and because of pandemic-related issues, they didn't have as much staff. Failing to mention, of course, those offloaded and the stresses he has put on employees due to, quite frankly, appalling decisions. If you know me and listen to the weekly DJ's Aviation podcast, or potentially also follow me on Twitter, you'll know my thoughts on Qantas, and they're quite strong, but I'd be very interested to hear your take on the comments. What do you make of the statements made by Alan Joyce? Are they absolutely ridiculous to be blaming the passengers for needing to speak to someone, or to potentially be stood in queues waiting at check-in? I personally think he's incredibly out of touch. Meanwhile, another airline within the industry is Flynas, a budget airline located in Saudi Arabia that is currently looking to place, according to all reports from local media, a gigantic order for aircraft that would actually be worth the sum of close to 15 billion USD and would comprise of 250 narrow-body planes, likely at this stage from either Airbus or Boeing, as discussions to sign the incredibly noteworthy contract are in motion. I think it'll personally be very interesting to see which way they opt, whether that be for Airbus or Boeing aircraft. Founded in 2007, however, starting operations many years later, the airline is relatively new to the aviation industry. It is also currently an Airbus-only carrier, with 35 A320 aircraft in its fleet, comprising of both the Dash 200 and also the Neos. The Dash 200s being the older of the pair, of course, with about an average age of 14 years. As for the 320 Neo, those are only at an average age of 1.5 years, so you can definitely see the difference between the two. What are your thoughts on this potential massive order currently being looked at within the aviation industry? You can let me know down below in the comments, because at the end of the day, an order for 250 aircraft is gigantic. Of course, we sometimes see orders for 70 or 80 and consider that to be very big, but typically we'll always see a smaller number, whether that be 6, 10, 15 or 20. So, for an order to come through for 250 units, it's going to definitely see the budget airline in Saudi Arabia stamp its intent on the aviation industry and market that it wishes to capture. These 250 units will help them exponentially in expanding their operations and overall route network, and I'm excited to see where they take it. Let's move on though to the final story of the day, sitting with Australian carrier Qantas once again. Despite facing continued delays, Qantas has announced a new direct route between Sydney and Bangalore to enhance their further connections in southern India, which will also see them set up a code-sharing agreement with India's largest domestic airline, Indigo, to help provide connections to more than 50 new cities that would, of course, positively impact customers wanting to utilize the services. The A330 will be the equipment in question, flying from the 14th of September on a 4 times weekly service. Meanwhile, as part of the secondary announcement for the new routes, Qantas and Jetstar did announce that they'd be flying directly to Seoul later this year from Sydney, with Qantas set to be utilising their A330 once again, and Jetstar utilising the 7878 Dreamliner. Sadly, both these flights, as mentioned, will be departing out of Sydney, which means Melbourne misses out once again. Alan Joyce, the CEO of Qantas, said it's clear that Australia is back on the map for international travellers. Demand for our international flights has rebounded since borders reopened, giving us new confidence to launch these new routes together with the marketing support from Destination New South Wales. The signing of the Australia/India Free Trade Agreement is a driver of travel demand as trade and investment links expand between Australia and India's population of more than 1 billion people. That's going to conclude today's Aviation News Weekly. If you have absolutely any thoughts on the topics I discussed in this video, whether that be British Airways, the multiple stories on Qantas, or that potential new order for 250 plus units from that budget carrier in Saudi Arabia, well, you can let me know, as always, down in the comment section below. Do subscribe to the channel if you are new, stay safe, and I will see you next time.